Today's lesson is cultural miscommunication, a matter of life and death. This month, we're going to have a great series on mending the relationship between community and law enforcement. Last month, we talked about love of self, significant others, and family, but this month is about showing some love for our community, and that's what I intend to do. This is our second episode for this month, and I'm excited because there was such an awesome job from our officers last week, and I was really proud of them, so I'm excited for the show that we have ahead for you. So before we get started, I want to welcome to the show my very special guest, Judge Ramona Taylor, who's my co-host for this special series. I want to give her a round of applause again for joining me.
Thank you.
And helping me pull together the series. I am forever grateful for her service and for her hard work that she's put into the series. I'm really happy about that, so thank you again. Also, I want to welcome to the show Sergeant William Gervin from the Virginia Beach Police Department, Officer Kimberly Cole from the Norfolk Police Department, Mr. Eric Leach, who's a criminal justice graduate from St. Leo University, and Julian Bayana, a criminal justice graduate from St. Leo University as well. Got it right. Okay, wonderful. Give them a round of applause. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm looking forward to having a great show, so make yourself comfortable as we get into this. There has been many panels and news programs focusing on police, African Americans, the use of force, equality, and a focus on differences, rather on healing. Today, we're talking about healing. Today, we're talking about bringing our community together by addressing some of the things that we all really need to talk about. I hope that you will open your mind and your heart to help strengthen our communities, not with hate, but with knowledge. That's what it's about. Respect for one another and love for your fellow neighbor. Let's get started into our questions. So the first question and the first really sort of definition that I want to talk about is cultural competence. This particular episode is on cultural miscommunication. Okay, it's a matter of life and death. And I came up with that because there's so much going on. And sometimes if you aren't aware of cultural things, if you don't know how to communicate with people from different cultures, sometimes it can cause death. Okay, and it's a matter of life and death. And some of the things that I think that are happening, it has a lot to do with not understanding each other. Okay, no matter where you come from, but sometimes those just walks of life. Maybe you're from a different state. We had some people who were talking about the city and southern thing on the last episode. Sometimes it's just a difference. You know, when I went to New York the first time, my husband, now boyfriend then, he was like, stop speaking to people. I was like, hey, hi. And he was like, they don't do that there. I was like, that's why they're just so rude. You know, in the South, even if I saw you 3 times a day, you still speak. You know, that's just how it goes. And so sometimes, though, I probably could have gotten in trouble too, right? But sometimes because of that cultural miscommunication, it can cause issues. So let's talk about cultural competence, something that we talk about in our field. And I actually wanted to bring this as an example from a different field. So I brought my education as a professor. Something that's important is to give you definitions. So here's your lesson, okay? So I wanted to define cultural competence from an education standpoint so that we can sort of blend it into what we're going to talk about. American classrooms are becoming increasingly diverse. As the NEA, the National Education Association, our president noted, educators with the skills, knowledge, and attitudes to value the diversity among students will contribute to the educational system designed to serve all students well. Cultural competence is a key factor in enabling educators to be effective with students from cultures other than their own. Cultural competence is having awareness of one's own cultural identity and views about difference and the ability to learn and build on the varying cultural community norms of the students and their families. Holding on to that. So what does this boil down to? Cultural competence is being aware and respectful of other cultures' rules and beliefs. You got that? Hold on to it, okay? So to everyone, when you're not culturally competent, there can be cultural miscommunication. How can a lack of understanding or awareness of the culture affect everyday interactions? I want to start up front.
That's actually can be huge, because if I only have a vantage point of how I do things and not understand how somebody else may, celebrate or worship,
Yes.
or, communicate, that can be a huge hang up. So I think it's very important that we're aware of other people's, social norms, so to speak,
Yes.
and kind of adapt to them.
Yes, I think that's really important.
I think
in Hampton Roads, it's even more so critical than other places in the country. With the military bases here, we're a melting pot.
Yes, we
There's
are.
every culture,
Yes.
every group is here, and it's very important that we understand each other
It is.
so that we can have that respect and
Yes.
we can come together as a strong community.
That's a really good point, because in Hampton Roads, we really are a melting pot.
I want to piggyback off what she said about the military and how it
Yes.
is a melting point. Being from Philadelphia and coming here,
Okay.
I think the police, the just the communication of how they have to deal with different races and ethnicities. I can't get it out, but I think they're doing a good job, and they're not as on the news as much as the other major cities and things. And I really never had a real problem with the officers here. Most of them, I've had classes with at criminal justice,
Yes.
so we kind of talk and communicate and ask them what can we do. Like I have two large sons, and they're young, but they're huge. They're 6
Yes.
feet and over. So I want to make sure they're not being perceived as where that miscommunication can become a problem, and they can end up dead. So talking with your hands or reaching in your pocket, and they're trained as an officer, that can be a threat. So just the insight that they gave me helped out as well.
Yes, that is really good. And I love how you're able to see both sides, because, that's one of the things that I was thinking of. One of the things that I used to hear all the time when guys would talk to me about some things. They're like, you can get in trouble just for running, this sort of came in mind and went away. And I was actually in Africa, and I was on this like little trolley bus, and these guys were running beside the bus, and I think they were running faster than the bus, and just people were just running from place to place. This is what they were doing, and it was just part of the culture. It wasn't a big deal. Nobody was after them. They were just running. It was just a part of the culture. And we stopped and we were talking to some people. We were like, so why is everybody running? They were like, to get there faster. Like, duh. Oh, but over in America, if you're running and, why are you running? Why are you in a rush? What's going on? It's, assumed to be something that's bad. And especially if you're attached to a certain culture. So those are the things that we want to be aware of. Or, another example I've heard, if you're from a different culture, say you're from a more small town that there's not a lot of ethnicity, and then you come to Hampton Roads and there's all of this melting pot and love for culture, it can be a little bit scary. So if all you see is what you see on TV, and then you come to the place like this, you're like, oh my God, I'm scared of this person. What are they going to do? And then something happens. And so those type of things, again, matter of life and death.
Some very, very key points. I think I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And
New Jersey in the house.
coming down here, you do see the melting pot, and you see that. I mean, the Hispanic community here over the past decade has, I think, almost doubled.
It has.
I
It's
think
grown.
we are, since the last census in 2010, there's about 90,000 Hispanics just here in the Hampton Roads area. And to not be able to communicate or be able to articulate yourself as sure law enforcement or just a regular person, not having those communication skills, I mean, like you said, it can lead to a matter of life and death.
Yeah, and it can be scary on both ends, is what we want people to see, because again, just that cultural piece and not understand. And again, we're not just talking about color. Again, we're talking about all sorts of things. Even I think someone mentioned religious beliefs. And so, if you get a call and someone has a certain religious beliefs, and you're like, that's not the norm. Like, this is not what we do. She can't have that baby in the house. Like, you need to no, this is what we do. And it can cause issues. And the person is not trying to be disrespectful, but maybe it's a matter of culture. So those are one of the things that we want to keep in mind as we talk about sort of what those differences, what they look like, and how we can sort of mend some of those relationships.
We've been talking a lot about cultural differences, and all of you have shared a lot of insight about our area in particular. And needless to say, we're all aware of the fatalities that have occurred in the different states in our country over the past year or so. And as Eric indicated, we haven't had that problem much here. So I'm wondering, because you're dealing with people from so many different cultures, perhaps so many different states and even countries, I'm sure there have been instances where perhaps maybe the person was acting out because the person maybe didn't speak our language and didn't understand and became, aggressive and was escalating. Do your departments have policies that help you deal with people who are not complying with your directives, who are being overly aggressive in your encounters with them?
Yes, I would assume, I know in Virginia Beach we have a use of force policy, and basically everything is dictated off of the person's behavior. You have to take into account the totality of the circumstance, what kind of call you're going to, what's going on, what's the background information, what's the backstory. And then from there, you're able to kind of paint a picture of what's going on. So you should know when you're an officer arriving on scene, maybe somebody is already upset or maybe they've been assaulted. So you kind of have to take that into place. Emotions and tensions may be high. There may be some yelling. There may be somebody that is, upset. So you have to kind of go from there. But our use of force policy and when officers are allowed to use force is pretty much dictated by the person's behavior.
Okay, thank you.
The first thing that we want to do when we arrive on any scene is to secure the scene and make sure that it's safe for everyone. Yeah. One of the ways that we do that is by a way that I was taught as a child: seek first to understand and then to be understood. So usually if we take that into consideration, make everything as safe as we can, and sometimes we're going to have to use force very quick if the scene dictates that, just like the sergeant from Virginia Beach said. A lot of that, our action is going to be determined quite a lot by the actions of the people that were being called to assist. But we do want to make the scene safe, and when things are safe enough for us to do so, we want to first understand what's going on. And once we start to understand, usually we can come to some sort of resolution pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Very good. One of the things that I want to say to that, on an earlier episode, we talked about some of those things, and I love that you said seek to understand, because in psychology, that's huge. I always tell my students, I don't want you just to listen. I want you to listen to understand. And there's a huge difference in there. You're just listening. Sometimes you're thinking of what you might want to say. Right. That's not listening. But when you listen to understand, you overlook sort of the body language. You can overlook the yelling, and I just want to understand you. And sometimes people can get caught up, because of cultural differences in your body language and your yelling and hand gestures. Just be calm and let's talk about what's going on. And sometimes you have to let the person blah, 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 blah. So what you're saying is, so the dog was loose and then he got in the house and then this caused some ruckus and you decide to go and yell at the neighbor. Is that what happened? Okay. And so I bet you all have to have some counseling skills in there too, right? Yeah. Because I love that you again said seek to understand. And that's important for people to know that when you arrive, your goal is safety. Your goal is not to come and cause more chaos. The goal is to come and help. Okay, and there's training for that. So my question that's going to include my guys in the back next is, there's a great deal of mistrust many times of law enforcement among ethnic groups. Are there a disproportionate percentage of ethnic individuals affected by the criminal justice system, based on your studies? And how do individual choices play a role? Or is the system or is it the system? So is it the individuals or is it the system?
In my perspective, I think it's more of the individuals, because most of the officers that we had at St. Leo, they seem to have a good training program in place. And like I said, it's not really too bad in this area, but growing up in like Philly, where they had community policing back in the day. So that officer who walked that beat, he knew most of the people that were there. So I mean, we also had like community policing where they have actions and Friday night block parties where they would block the street off, and they knew everybody in the community. So the criminal back then was, you had to respect the criminal like they had to respect the officer. So if you're going to do something, you don't want to get caught. But the criminal today is, I'm not sure if the right words is that the officers know how to handle them, and the officer is not giving that criminal respect, and you're not giving the officer respect. And it's a difference where I honestly think that if it was the other way around, where minorities were killing a lot of Caucasians, and some legislation would have been put in place to try to study it more and just come up with a better plan of understanding. Like it could be the communication, but if an officer, the training that they have in place to, like he said, to when you arrive on the scene, you want to make sure everything is secure, but sometimes you could tase somebody, or maybe a flashlight hitting on the hand, but you never know what that criminal. You want to make sure you're going home that night, and it's just like a lot of people are getting killed just by this misinterpretation.
Exactly, and that's why we're having this particular episode, because we talked about earlier. We wanted, Judge Taylor and I talked about, we wanted people to know that officers are people too. They want to go home at the end of the day, okay? And when they arrive on the scene, they don't want chaos either. They don't want anyone to get hurt, including themselves, and definitely not you. And so we have to remember that. And so, you know, I do think that there's a mix of the system, because not everyone utilizes their training, but at the same time, it's also individual choices. And some people, because of that miscommunication, they come with that disrespect. Sometimes it's passed down generation to generation. And then sometimes, you know, you're just going to have, you know, someone who says, I'm going to go off of my training. So I do think sometimes it's a little bit of both. But sometimes I think people like to say it's disproportionate. It's more of the police officers, it's more of the people. And I think it's a little bit of both, and which is why we're having these communication conversations. Okay. Julian, did you want to add something?
I think nationwide, the conversation that's being had is people are starting to rethink how community does, or how they should engage the communities that they're serving.
Yes.
I mean, when you look at the events of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Eric Garner in New York, the 12-year-old kid in Cleveland, I mean, you start looking at everything that happened, and it focuses the conversation on the Black community. Rightly so. And I think the Latinos need to also be engaged in that, because they haven't been as engaged in the same thing. Because I think we, at times, maybe suffer a little bit more in regards to, well, what's your legal status? Are you undocumented? Where's your papers at? That type of situation. So there really is a gap somewhat, and we definitely need to figure out a way to bridge that, bridge that gap.
Yeah, but I really think that discussions like this really do help to foster dialogue and positive communication among the community, and we're all a part of that community. Lastly, Sergeant Gervin and Officer Cole, can you provide a list of quick tips for what to do stop by a police officer? Like, just let our audience know, like, you know, this, we want to be safe, we want you to be safe. Here's a couple of quick tips to do if you're stopped.
Sure. The first thing is to comply. The officer is stopping you for a reason. You may not understand the reason, or you may disagree with it, but just to comply. The understanding will come, or you can get the, I guess, the information on why you're being stopped later. You know, the officer doesn't want to use force, and to prevent the use of force, just you go ahead and comply. That takes the use of force off the table. At that point, once you get to the officer's car, back to the precinct, or wherever he wants you to go, she wants you to go, then we can get to that point of asking questions and understanding. And if you feel like you've been done wrong, then there's chains of information that you can pass on. You can talk to the internal affairs officers, you can talk to the officer supervisor. But I think for everybody's safety is to make sure right off the bat is to just go ahead and comply. Yeah. That's the best thing to do.
I love that. I love that. You know, and I want to end with just saying that, you know, sometimes I know that it's scary. It's just like, you know, there's a whole generation of what we don't understand of people who don't go to the hospital for one reason, because they feel like they're never going to come out. Okay. And so that's real. And so it's the same thing sometimes with addressing or having to address a police officer. But listen to what Sergeant Gervin is saying to you, because that is the best way to handle this situation. I know that for a lot of people, you feel like, well, as soon as I get in the car, then I'm never going to come back out. That's not true. Okay. That's not always true. And so you still have to follow the laws of this, you know, the state of the country. And so there are certain things that you still have to do. And so make sure you understand some of that generational stuff that's being passed down, so you're not running, kicking and screaming, causing more issues when it could have been so much better. Okay, we want to thank the officers, and we want to thank so much all of our guests for being here today. You guys have done a great job. They're not going anywhere, because I'm going to hold them here for our community resources so they can share a little bit more information. Thank you again. Give them a round of applause. They've done a great job. Thank you so much for watching. It's Life Changing. We'll be right back. It's Life Changing with Dr. Carlita Perry. It's now time for our community resources. Again, I have with me these wonderful, wonderful guests. Again, I want to give them a round of applause again for yourself for doing such a great job on our first segment. At this point, I just want you to get to know them. I want you to know, again, all the great things that they are doing in the community and how they became the wonderful people that they are. So I'm going to start again with Judge Taylor, just telling us a little bit about why you decided to go into law or law enforcement or criminal justice.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. For me, it was a real easy choice.
Okay.
When I was in law school, my favorite classes were criminal law, criminal procedure, and I was fascinated by people and what they do and why they do the things that they do. And that love of the criminal justice system took me to my job as a prosecutor, my job as a judge, and now my job as an associate professor at St. Leo.
Yes.
And the good thing about being a professor, it gives me a lot of opportunities to be here and
Yes.
and also the other community forums that
Yes.
I've been involved with. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to just share with the community, what our law enforcement officers have to offer, and to help people understand that law enforcement officers are there to help. They're not there to hurt, and they're there to keep all of us safe. So it's been a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, and in case people don't know, Judge Taylor has been a huge advocate for sort of this community building. I've seen her do many panels, and I've been to a couple of those, and they've all been awesome. And so I want to thank you for what you're doing in the community too, because sometimes we don't get the thank you for doing this. This is just something you love to do.
Thank you very much.
And it's not easy to pull together these type of things. People think that what we do is easy. It's not easy. So I respect you for that and love what you do.
Thank you.
And so officers, tell us about yourself.
Okay. Sergeant Gervin with the Virginia Beach Police Department. I've been with Virginia Beach for about 13 years, and I know I just look young.
You look
And my current position is the recruiting coordinator and selection coordinator. So overseeing the department's recruiting initiatives. I do a lot of open forums and ambassadorship type jobs too. I love what I do, being able to engage with the community and talk with the community and influence people to consider this as a career. I kind of came into law enforcement in college. I was a junior at Norfolk State, and I was leaning either towards law school or getting into law enforcement. And I applied with Virginia Beach and got on. And I've loved my job. I love my career and what I do.
That's wonderful. You can kind of tell.
I'm Officer Cole, and I'm with the Norfolk Police Department. I've been coming up on the end of my 10th year.
Oh, good.
Now I'm currently assigned to the training division, so I help train the new police recruits.
Good.
Before I was in community policing for a long time, and I got to interact with the community on very different levels, and I loved that. That was a big passion of mine. I got into law enforcement. My grandfather was a police officer, and he just knew everything about people, not the nosy part, like, oh, this person does this or that person does that. He just understood so much about every different culture, and I really liked that.
Yes.
So I wanted to go into that as well.
I think that's wonderful.
Thank
And you mentioned community policing. What a lot of people don't understand, as we learned from our first episode and from this one, is that a lot of that's still happening. People, again, we've been bombarded with all these other things that it's still happening. There are still police officers in the community. They're still doing certain things. They're still walking the beat, they're still talking to people, there's still that relationship building. So we see a lot of it that seems like it's new, but I want to say it's not new. Okay, it's been happening for years. It's just we've been bombarded with all these things on the news, but it's still happening. So thank you again for what you do as well. So,
I got into law after I retired from the military by being involved with it while in the military. So before I retired, I started going to school, pursuing my degree in criminal justice. That's where I ran into Judge Taylor and the criminal justice program. And now I'm pursuing my PhD. I'm trying to get a DBA. Also involved with the community. I'm on a PTA with Hampton High School, Kickingham, and an elementary school, Phoenix. Do volunteer work with the Red Cross, and always looking for opportunities. We do fundraisers, the Polar Plunge, and just want to be involved to make sure I give back to the community.
well,
So
I think you're
that's
doing
my
a great
thing.
job.
Oh, thank you.
You're doing a lot. That's
you.
wonderful.
Currently, I'm a graduate student pursuing my MBA, and then a prospective law student waiting to hear back from one of the schools. Other than that, I was a Marine for a couple of years, and now I'm kind of waiting in the reserves
For that next step.
Yep, for the next step.
I love it. Well, I think you're a great representation for the community, all of what you do. Again, like I said, I want to say thank you, because I said earlier on my first series episode that we don't say this enough, and we need to make sure we say this to our officers, like we say this to our military. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for all that you do, and for all of you and what you're going to do. I love it, and all the great community work that you're doing. Keep up the good work. Thank you for your service. To all of you watching, again, when you see an officer, I want you to try something new too. I want you to walk up and I want you to say, thank you for your service. Try something new. Maybe sometimes it is our attitude and not just someone else's. Don't pay so much attention to what's going on everywhere around the world. We're going to have more conversations on this. Pay attention to your actions. That's the one thing that you can change, okay? Thank you so much for watching It's Life Changing. As we spread the word, make sure you use social media to spread love and not hate. May God bless you, and I will see you next time on It's Life Changing.